just to say that this is a part of a larger research project, and there's a couple of us, two of us are online. Joined by Claire Grant and Alain Renaud. And I am
Well, you should be made co-host now.
Fantastic. So this should all work. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm program lead for animation at the University of Greenwich, and I'm also lead on this research project. It's called Participate, and I'm joined here.
Dominik, Havsteen-Franklin, I'm Professor of Practice in Arts Therapies. I spent a lot of time working as a consultant in arts therapies in the NHS. I've joined this project for the last couple of years as a researcher, as a Professor of Practice.
And then we've got Alain Renaud online.
Hello, I'm Alain. I'm in the middle of a very noisy place talking about noise, so I hope you can hear me. And I'm basically, amongst many things, a sound designer. I'm very interested in the phenomenon of noise pollution.
Thank you. And then we've got Claire Grant here.
Hello, yes, I'm Claire Grant. I'm an arts psychotherapist working in an NHS trust and with very much focus on mental health and well-being. And I work with art, music, drama and dance movement psychotherapists.
Do you want to make a start by talking a bit about the project?
Yes, thank you. So we're here to talk about a study called KIMA. And I've been really excited to be part of this project over the last couple of years. As you've heard briefly, the people behind the study are a diverse group of media arts practitioners, researchers, artists, healthcare practitioners, and really with the aim of bringing together art, technology, science, and thinking about well-being. So KIMA is part of a bigger project called Participate, as Olive has said, which is a suite of case studies. So we're going to give you a bit of just a very brief background about Participate, tell you about the research context, and then go on to saying in more detail about the KIMA study, and finish with some of the guidance that is one of the outputs of our research. So Participate's an AHRC-funded research project looking at the effect of participatory online art on our sense of social connection and well-being. So really what we want to see is how online participatory art can promote and foster social inclusion and well-being for the public, and we really want to promote what we find. And so if you saw the sort of previous slide, you will have seen that the project has a large number of research partners, and that's been really great to be able to work with the Alain group, the Noise Abatement Society, and the public health expert, Professor Stephen Stansfield has been involved with that, the RNIB Northern Ireland, the National Gallery, the Charity The Joy of Sound, Neurocreate, Greenwich and Brunel universities, and my trust, CNWL. So really what we do know is that there are many beneficial effects on mental health of participating in socially connecting arts experiences. But little research is known on how participatory arts experiences online in an online context can mitigate harmful effects of social isolation and sensory deprivation. And this, of course, was such a key issue during the pandemic. But again, the experience of social distancing can, of course, happen for a range of other reasons. We know that some populations suffer or experience this disproportionately. And a range of mobility, health, sensory and situational, for example, work-related issues can all impact on people's access to and opportunities for social connectedness. So our interest has really led us to the research questions here, which is about whether online facilitated participatory art can contribute to a perceived experience of social connectedness, what the best practices are in participatory art facilitation, so how we can facilitate these experiences in the best ways in online and collaborative conditions, and what the specific challenges experienced by vulnerable groups during online facilitation of participatory art might be, and how we can best address them. And if we move on to the objective slide, we really want to help develop develop the evidence on the effectiveness of online participatory art engagement, to think about addressing social isolation and sensory deprivation, to develop best practices, to help have some input into government guidance and policy advice around these areas, and to develop a stakeholder network consisting of cultural partners, health organisations, and so on, that list that you've already seen, and to keep developing our partners and collaborators. I'll hand over now to Olive and Alain.
Yeah, so maybe just to add that this particular case study that we're presenting is part of a wider suite, as Claire said, of case studies, and they've been looking at different groups, so different beneficiaries, people with access needs, visually impaired, mental health workers, and in this case, young people. So KIMA noise, in a way, is also part of a long-term development. So we started originally with the project in 2019, pre-COVID, as part of a residency at the Tate. And it was really interested and also informed by research that is ongoing, that is not necessarily our research, but that we've been tapping into. So we've been collaborating, as Claire said, with Professor Stephen Stansfield, who is at Queen Mary University and one of the leading experts on the effect of noise on health. And this research is ongoing since the 1970s. There's a lot that we know of how noise affects us. We know that it affects both our minds but also our bodies. Specifically learning, right? So reading comprehension, for instance, and for young people. And there's also this idea that noise especially is linked to long-term effects if you've got a long-term exposure. We know that noise affects our sleep, right? Our sleep patterns. It can lead to all sorts of further symptoms if you're longer exposed to noise. So specifically with noise levels over 65 dB, you start to really see effects. What I also wanted to say is that there's really this link between the physiological and the subjective, the very subjective nature of noise, right? So what might be effective for one person might be irrelevant for another. And so it's really important to kind of unpack this a little bit and to look at noise a bit holistically. So I guess what I mentioned before is this idea of long-term impact as well. So people who are living in very noisy areas might experience this effect of noise in different ways. So it might actually have physiological effects, and that can be a range of different things. So it can even be linked to diabetes, which is quite interesting. Heart rate is an obvious one. There's also research that shows that there is a relationship between noise levels and heart attacks, right? So it's interesting to know that there's these two sides to the perception of noise, so the subjective, but also the physiological effect of noise. And this is known, right? So this is existing research that we've been looking into. And there's also a legal framework around this. So there's the Environmental Protection Act from 1990, and there is quite a lot that is being done, specifically on a local council level, right? So DEFRA, so the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, they have a noise team, but the mayoral team in London, at least, doesn't actually have a noise team. It's the local councils who are dealing with this. And as you might know, noise can actually be prosecuted, and usually it's these noise abatement notices that can be issued if there's no reaction to a complaint, right? So what is interesting is actually it's hardly ever that it's a single complaint that leads to these prosecutions. It's usually when there's a huge group of people, a large quantity of people who are complaining, that local council will act. What is also interesting, and I guess important to know, is this idea that very often it's the people who are issuing a noise level, who are actually responsible for it, they might not even be aware of how much it affects others. And I guess this is where our work starts to kick in, because we're really interested in raising awareness for noise and making sure that that actually there's a public debate around it. So, Alain, do you want to talk a bit about the artistic background? Alain?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically Noise started in its first iteration as a pretty big installation at the Tate Modern, where we were basically capturing live signals of noise around the Tate. And we were broadcasting them into the space, and the installation was at 3 levels. The first level was the ability to, through an interface, through a tactile interface, to make the noise travel around an immersive sound installation, to really raise awareness of this noise pollution that is surrounding the area. The second level was more of a visual installation where we could actually see 3D structures vibrating again in real time based on the noise pollution of planes, for example, and other kind of impact-worthy type of noises. And the third one was a filtered down version of the noise pollution surrounding us, where you could actually feel the sound below 40 hertz, basically, in terms of frequency. That was really something to really raise this awareness of noise and to actually make it into a sort of generic, acceptable form of art. The second, later on, our project basically went online, and now we actually have a new noise project, which is basically a web page on where you can actually stream live points across the globe through our own streaming points, but also with a partnership with a project called Locus Sonus that provides live streaming points. And you can basically create your own sound walk, I would say, by navigating through and creating your own trajectory through different noise points. So that's pretty much where we are at right now with the project in terms of outputs.
Thank you. And this is really where Participate kicks in, that we're looking at how we can translate these site-specific installations into online interfaces, right? Things that you can interact with from wherever you are. And also this idea of a participatory nature. So how can you facilitate that so people actually feel connected with each other and there's a meaningful engagement with these noisecapes. So here you can see you can stream yourself from, as Alain said, wherever you are. We have streaming points from Japan to America, and you can just unmute yourself and then basically emit your own noisecapes and draw sound trajectories that connect these different sound points, and it's like a virtual sound walk, if you so want. And what we're doing with the research is we're trying to understand if these kind of creative engagements with noise lead to more social connectivity, so social connectedness, as Claire said. So we've been working with students at the University of Greenwich and at Brunel University to understand if the perception of noise changes when using the app, so before and after the use of the app. And to do so, we had several surveys, and interestingly, there seems to be an effect. So far, it's been rather small groups, so we had a group of 14 and a group of 5 students at Brunel, so 19 in total. But what is interesting to see is that there seems to be a pattern that when you think about noise, it tends to be something that's quite uncomfortable, something that lots of negative terms come to mind. But if you engage with it interactively, something changes about your perception of noise. And actually, a lot of the feedback we received afterwards was that it was a lot less negative and a lot more interested in the kind of quality of the noise that surrounds you. And also the kind of noises that bother you, that you think bother you, might be different than the noises that actually bother you when you really start to listen. And that's part of the project, is to really engage with the public to understand how they think about noise, if they know how they can help themselves when something becomes really too much for them, what are the kind of interventions that they come up with that they can, how can they also escalate a situation and report a noise complaint? Are they really aware about the tools that they have to help themselves? So we've had installations at Somerset House, at the Cable Depot Gallery, and also we worked with students on inviting them to create their own visual responses. And all of this research is obviously part of the EVA publications, but also we're still developing it further. And it's currently leading to a toolkit, so a set of guidelines that is trying to summarize our insights and how we can translate these physical installations into online installations.
So, as you can see, there's been a suite of different arts-based projects which have been digital, online, and engaging with lots of different communities that don't normally engage with kind of mainstream arts or even sort of bespoke digitalized arts. So part of our aim is to produce various different outputs that enable these kind of projects to be produced more widely. And to do this, of course, you need some sort of guidelines or framework, some way of introducing different ways of having these conversations and participatory encounters, which kind of relates to the previous presentation, where there's a kind of sensitive dialogue that takes place between communities, researchers, academics, artists, and so forth. So one of the outputs we're just currently finalising is a toolkit, which will be an online, open access, available to everybody, to help facilitate the development, execution and evaluation of online arts projects. It's to engage marginalised communities through digital platforms, empower project leaders, participants and stakeholders, and provide the necessary tools, strategies and insights to ensure the successful implementation of participatory online digital arts projects. And you've got to remember, a lot of this was, in a way, there's a lot of toolkits out there for face-to-face conduct and face-to-face project development, but there's more of a tricky grey area when it comes to online participatory work, partly because of the scale, the complexities of technology itself, but also engagement methods, and the kind of sensitive kind of dialogues around that. So what does it mean to be engaging with researchers, academics, online, and what does it mean to be engaging with the arts work? So these are good sort of questions for us, particularly on the ethics around inclusion. So our core values are simply based on this, that the arts and health projects that are produced online are created in an accessible format, so the barriers are reduced where possible to engage members. And so we're giving some guidelines about how this can be done, particularly through consultative processes. The second point is really about the kind of strategies that you might employ in those areas. So the first one, core values, which is about social inclusion. The second one about strategies that we employ. So this, in a sense, the toolkit might sound a bit sort of predetermined and rather sort of conclusive, and we've got it all done and sewn up. We don't intend it to be like that. We tend to be an evolving, adaptive, sort of creative space where we are offering our knowledge about the kind of experiences we've had, so we can place examples. But in a way, we want people to add to this further and further, so it develops as a kind of growing phenomena. So the toolkit is a kind of expanding, adaptive, creative guideline for future projects. So who's it for and why a situated approach? So very much, and again, this kind of relates very much to the previous presentation, we aren't trying to provide this universal framework. We are trying to think about the very situated nature of different communities and populations and how and why they might be engaging with the arts. So the case example you've just heard was about sound, and we know that sound can be very imposing and very problematic for some people. And so we're trying to think about how we successfully engage with the right people at the right time. So in that sense, it's not a one-size-fits-all by any means. I guess that's quite a unique sort of model of toolkit. So it's, you'll find lots of toolkits online that sound more like guidelines how to do it. You know, the toolkit for how to make this. This is more like an approach to how might you approach this? What kinds of conversations, dialogues might you begin with? And what lessons have we learnt? Toolkit sections is essentially, having gone through all the literature, our own experiences, consultation with the participants, we've come up with 10 different categories which need to be attended to. And these categories we've gone into in some detail with some examples about how we've approached them, the kind of solutions we've found. But essentially, we're looking at accessibility, the sense of developing a community, so there's connections between people to give it some sort of parameter. Experimentation, allowing for space to think about how you test it before sort of diving in. Establishing a shared language. People don't always speak the same language or understand the same concepts initially, so how do you have dialogues, conversations around those concepts and even develop new concepts from that space? Being transparent from the beginning, who, for, why, these are kind of important questions. Thinking about providing context. So where would this be helpful and not helpful? Where is it going to work? And what's the context of its future and history in terms of digitalization? And it's a meaningful engagement in the sense that we are building on connections to develop a sense of community. We do look at process rather than outcomes. You'll find with all the projects, I'm not saying we're trying to make a beautiful piece of artwork. It's about how we're engaging what happens in that space together. So it's not output focused. A constant iterative process of listening to feedback. But you build this into any kind of project, you're trying to get feedback, so there's a bit of a loop there. And the other thing is, which we're trying to do today, is really try and share this in an inclusive way. So the dissemination, engagement with further communities, so you can build on these ideas, increase situatedness, as we're calling it, is sort of paramount to the project. I won't go through all this, but we are, because of this issue around language, not being complex or assumed, we have also developed a glossary based on kind of research, evidence, and conversations we've had with participants, everything from accessibility to salience. So there's a different, quite broad concepts we've tried to delineate within the project. Last slide, just really thinking about what we might be doing in the future. We do want to think more broadly outside the UK, as we've already been doing with this project, for example. These different, so for example, if we were engaging with the Indigenous community, what would that mean? Why? Who for? I mean, it's kind of an important question. What do arts mean in different contexts? And what kind of guidelines might be produced? Technology is constantly evolving, so what other possibilities to include other communities might happen in the future? How might we redesign these kind of guidelines in collaboration? What kinds of insights can be developed through education curricula and thinking about training programs? So how might we support learning in this area? So that's something we're currently thinking about. And thinking about evaluation and situated research, which isn't sort of top-down heavy. So thinking about collaborative research models, participatory research, for example, arts-based research, they're all models that are applicable to this kind of way of working. And thinking about the supporting community-led toolkit innovation. So we're not taking ownership over this, we're simply hopefully starting something off that will evolve other contexts. So kind of we hope that in the future we have some sense of shared ownership around this space. But I believe that we're the first to be doing this in terms of digital online arts participation, thinking about how you ethically engage with other communities, particularly in the UK so far, as we've done. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. We're running a little bit short on time, so perhaps you could ask questions of Dominik and Olive after the event.